Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a massive, fundamental shift in how the American government actually operates. Right off the bat, we saw a sheer flood of day one executive orders that really kicked off a completely new era of presidential authority. We're talking about a strategy that insiders were literally calling days of thunder. It's a deliberate, flood the zone approach designed to overwhelm the system with rapid, sweeping actions. From freezing federal hiring to rolling back dozens of previous executive orders with just the stroke of a pen, the goal was to instantly project unconstrained power. But, to really understand the mechanics of what's happening right now, we have to take a quick look back. Look at this famous quote from Richard Nixon. It perfectly frames the absolute core question of America's constitutional structure. Is a president bound by the law, or does a president stand above it? Nixon essentially argued that executive action, by definition, can't be illegal if it's done in the nation's interest. That belief, of course, led to a profound constitutional crisis, and it's the exact same legal philosophy that is being stress-tested in real time today. Over the last few decades, we've watched this massive pendulum swing in executive power. After Watergate, in the 1970s, Congress pushed back hard. They created independent agencies, inspectors general, special counsels, basically trying to put guardrails on the presidency so no single person could become unchecked. But then, that pendulum began to swing back. After 9/11, we saw a massive expansion of executive power, justified by national security. And that brings us right to 2024, to a landmark Supreme Court immunity decision that has fundamentally altered the balance of power and set the stage for the current administration's agenda. So here is how we're going to break this explainer down. 1. The unitary executive theory. 2. The Supreme Court granting immunity. 3. Overhauling the Justice Department. 4. Dismantling the bureaucracy. And 5. A clash with the courts. Let's get right into it.
Okay, part 1. The unitary executive theory.
So what does this actually mean? The unitary executive theory is the constitutional idea that vests absolutely all executive power in one single person, the president. Think of the president as Gulliver from Gulliver's Travels. After Watergate, Congress acted kind of like those tiny Lilliputians, trying to tie Gulliver down with 1,000 tiny ropes. Things like ethics laws, independent watchdogs, civil service protections. Well, the unitary executive theory argues that all of those ropes are actually unconstitutional. Proponents of this theory believe the president should be able to just snap those ropes and exercise complete, unfragmented control over the entire executive branch.
Moving on to part 2, the Supreme Court grants immunity. In a truly historic ruling authored by Chief Justice John Roberts, the Supreme Court declared that a president may not be prosecuted for exercising his core constitutional powers. This was huge. It effectively ended the federal prosecutions hanging over the former president and gifted the administration with sweeping legal immunity. It essentially gave the president a constitutional shield against future legal consequences for official acts, unleashing a powerful feeling of being unconstrained by normal legal bounds.
Armed with this new sense of power, the administration initiated roughly 1,500 pardons and commutations for individuals involved in the January 6th Capitol attack. Now, the source material points out two very distinct ways this is being viewed. Supporters of the administration view it as completely justified retribution, freeing people they believe were unfairly targeted by a politicized justice system. Critics, on the other hand, view this as a really dangerous green light for violence. They argue it signals to supporters that if you break the law on behalf of the president, he's going to use his power to protect you. This brings us to part 3, overhauling the Justice Department. Since Watergate, the established norm was an independent Department of Justice. It was kept at arm's length from the president to avoid any abuse of power. Well, this new approach completely shatters that wall. The administration argues that as the chief law enforcement officer, the DOJ operates at the direct directive and loyalty of the president. And to enforce this, the administration purged career prosecutors and installed staunch loyalists at the very top, even bringing in the president's former personal defense attorneys, like Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche. Let's look at a concrete example of how this plays out in reality, with the federal corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. The Southern District of New York had indicted him, but according to the sources, Adams actually appealed directly to the president, arguing the case was hindering his ability to help with the administration's immigration agenda. The result? The DOJ's acting deputy attorney general ordered the case completely dismissed. This sparked massive outrage among career lawyers, leading the lead prosecutor, Danielle Sassoon, to resign in protest over what critics called a wildly improper political quid pro quo. It sent a very clear, chilling message across the country. The DOJ now answers directly to the White House. Part 4.
dismantling the bureaucracy.
This is where we see incredibly aggressive use of executive power. This was the rapid, step-by-step playbook for dismantling an agency, and it was used as a test case on USAID, the agency that handles foreign aid. They didn't even wait for congressional approval. They just placed large chunks of employees on administrative leave overnight. They abruptly cut off access to emails and databases, which brought billions of dollars in global programs to a dead stop. And they immediately terminated the independent inspector general. In a flash, USAID's workforce was reduced by 98%. It was a total shock and awe demonstration, designed to prove the executive branch could forcefully wrest spending power right out of Congress's hands.
And the firing of the USAID Inspector General? Not an isolated incident. Across the government, 17 inspectors general were systematically purged. Remember those Watergate reforms we talked about earlier? Well, Congress created inspectors general specifically to be independent watchdogs over federal spending. By taking them out, the administration effectively blinded Congress and removed independent accountability from the inside.
Which leads us to our final section, a clash with the courts. The courts are often seen as the last remaining check on executive power. To control them, the administration first targeted the lawyers bringing the cases. They used incredibly aggressive tactics against major law firms that had opposed them in the past. They issued executive orders revoking security clearances and actually denying these private attorneys access to federal buildings. The source material describes this as flat-out gangster-style intimidation meant to destroy a firm's business. And according to reports, it worked. It resulted in mass capitulations. Most large firms struck deals to appease the administration, agreeing to provide nearly $1 billion in pro-administration legal services just to get back in the government's good graces. But what happens when the administration and the courts collide directly? We got a stark answer to that during a massive immigration crackdown. The administration began rushing alleged gang members onto deportation flights to a prison in El Salvador. Civil rights lawyers sued, and a federal judge issued a temporary restraining order, demanding the flights be halted to ensure these individuals got their constitutional right to due process. The administration's response? They totally ignored the judge. They defied a federal court order and landed the plans anyway. It was a move that brazenly tested the absolute limits of judicial power in America.
Ultimately, looking at all of this, the source material leaves us with one overarching question that we really have to ask ourselves. Do we have the rule of law, or do we have royal decrees? We have just witnessed a rapid, systematic restructuring of the American government, from sweeping immunity to a fiercely loyal Justice Department to the dismantling of federal agencies and the defiance of the courts. What you've seen in this explainer are the mechanics of the unitary executive theory in action. Our entire constitutional structure is being stressed right now, and what it looks like on the other side will depend entirely on how these unprecedented actions are understood and answered. Thanks so much for joining me, and as always, keep questioning what you see.